السلام عليكم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The promised Messiah, alayhi salam, tells in his book, Divine Manifestations, that Allah said to him, I have chosen thee for the manifestation of my mysteries, and the earth and the heavens are with you as they are with me. You are to me as is my throne. In the same book, the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, also writes, God has informed me again and again that he will grant me great glory and will instill my love in people's hearts. He shall spread my movement all over the world and shall make my sect triumphant over all other sects. Allah also said to the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, I shall cause thy message to reach the corners of the earth. The word apostle comes from the Greek word apostolos, which means messenger. Ansgar has for more than 1,000 years been called the Nordens apostle, that is, the apostle of the Nordic countries. The reason for that is that Ansgar, who lived from 801 till 865 after Christ, who was Archbishop of Hamburg and Bremen, founded churches in Denmark and Sweden. But Denmark and Sweden are only two countries. The three other Nordic countries are missing: Finland, Iceland, and Norway. Kamal Yusuf Sahib, who sits here among us today and who has introduced Ahmadiyya in all these 5 countries, Nordic countries, is, in my opinion, the person who really deserves the title Nordens Apostle, the apostle of the Nordic countries. And you will soon understand why. I will now say a few words about Ahmadiyya in each of the 5 Nordic countries. And each one of you who belong to the different countries will think, oh, he should have said much more about my country. But the time which I have been given is very limited. So it will all be very short. I will be starting with Sweden, since that was the first Nordic country where the Ahmadiyya missionary settled down. Already in 1935, the second Khalifa sent Maulvi Ghulam Ahmad Bashir, who was at that time missionary in Holland, to Sweden to investigate the possibilities to open a mission there. But then more than 20 years were passing before the next step was taken. And the second Khalifatul Masih, may Allah be pleased with him, sent Kamal Yusuf Sahib to Sweden to work as a missionary there, with responsibility also for the 2 other Scandinavian countries, Denmark and Norway. Kamal Yusuf Sahib came to Sweden 4th of June in 1956. And as far as I know, he was then 23 years old. He knows that better than I, but I think he was 23 years old. He first settled in Gothenburg, then moved to Stockholm. The first one to be converted was a young Swede by name Gunnar Hugo Eriksson. He was given the Muslim name Saiful Islam Mahmud. He was a brilliant young man who worked very, very hard for the Jamaat. Already in 1959, he started to publish a small magazine called Active Islam. It was a magazine published on behalf of Islam's mission in Scandinavien, the Islamic mission in Scandinavia. It contained articles translated or written by members not only in Sweden, but also in Denmark and Norway. But it was Saiful Islam Mahmoud who was editor and the driving force. Late autumn 1958, Kamal Yusuf was transferred to Oslo, and then after a few years to Copenhagen, all the time being responsible for the 3 Scandinavian countries, and Sweden had to wait till 1970 to get the missionary responsible for Sweden only. He was based in Gothenburg. In 1976, the third Khalifat al-Masih, may Allah be pleased with him, inaugurated Nasr Mosque at Högsbohöjd in Gothenburg. After some years, this mosque proved to be too small, and a new and larger mosque at the same place was inaugurated by the 4th Khalifa in 2001. In 2016, the 5th Khalifa, Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah support him with his mighty help, inaugurated the Mahmud Mosque in Malmö. In 1988, a Swedish translation of the Holy Quran was published. The translation was by a Swedish Muslim woman, Kristina Gustafsson, who has the Muslim name Kanita Sadika. And the same Kanita Sadika has prepared the revised version, which is now in print. Alhamdulillah. For the time being, the Jamaat in Sweden has missionaries in Gothenburg, Stockholm, Malmö, and Kalmar, with mosques in Gothenburg and Malmö, and community houses in Stockholm and Kalmar. The Jamaat, which has approximately 1,200 members, has a radio station and is also producing TV programs which are sent on the local TV. From Sweden to Denmark. Kamal Yusuf Said, who in 1956 was based in Sweden, toured Denmark the same year. At that time, there were already some Danish converts to Islam. Some of them became members of the Ahmadiyya movement, and a community was established in 1959. All members of the Ahmadiyya community are important, but I have to mention, or I want to mention especially, Sven Åge Madsen, in our community better known as Abdusalam Madsen. He was a very strong believer who did tremendous work for the Jamaat and who translated the Holy Quran into Danish. The translation was first published in 1967. Many editions have later followed. And in addition to translate the Quran, Abdusalam Madsen also wrote many books and numerous newspaper articles about Islam. Abdusalam Madsen, who was born in 1928, passed away in 2007. I would like to mention two other important Danish personalities from the first 50 years of Ahmadiyyat in Denmark. Kai Krog, with the Muslim name Kamal Ahmad, who for many decades was a very active Tabligh worker and also a spokesman for tolerance and religious dialogue, and who wrote and published a large number of books and magazines about Islam. He passed away in 2014. And then Sven Hansen, with the Muslim name Haji Noor. He had already converted to Islam when he, after some years, learned to know Ahmadiyyat and made bayat. He was a deeply pious Muslim, very humble and modest. In his older days, he settled in Malaysia, where he passed away in April last year. In 1967, the Nusrat Jahan Mosque, the very first mosque in Denmark, was inaugurated by the third Khalifa. Many attempts were made to officially register the Jamaat in Denmark, and for many years the Danish authorities refused. But at last, in 1974, the community was recognized by the Danish authorities as the first Muslim community in Denmark. The Danish Jamaat is publishing the quarterly Active Islam, which has its roots in the magazine published by Saiful Islam Mahmoud Eriksson in Sweden as early as in 1959. Today, Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat has 2 mosques in Denmark. In addition to Nusrat Jahan Mosque from 1967, it opened a mosque in Nakskov in 2008. There are roughly 600 Ahmadiyya Muslims in Denmark. Approximately 70 of them are of Albanian origin. And although some of those have moved to the Copenhagen area, where most of the Ahmadiyya Muslims in Denmark are living, the majority of the Albanian members is living in Nakskov. Then to Finland. Kamal Yusuf Sahib first visited Finland in 1968. In the 1970s and 80s, Norway was responsible for the Tabligh work in Finland. A pamphlet was printed in Finnish language, and volunteers went to Finland to do Tabligh there. Some Finns signed Bayat. Later, Sweden and thereafter Germany was responsible for Finland. In 2013, there was a small Jamaat there. In 2014, the present missionary, Musawar Ahmad, was sent there. The Jamaat has its center in Helsinki, Helsingfors, and approximately 250 members, most of them of Pakistani origin. And then to Iceland. Kamal Yusuf Sahib visited Iceland in April 1969, and as far as I remember, there was in the following years some contact with Icelanders living in Copenhagen. During the following decades, literature was sent to Icelandic libraries from Denmark as well as from England. A young man from Iceland signed Bayat in 1987. From 2008, Iceland was supervised by Germany, and for 5 years a missionary alternated between Germany and Iceland. In 2013, Hofsor approved the formal posting of a missionary in Iceland, and the present missionary, Mansour Ahmad Malik, was sent there the same year. The Icelandic Jamaat now consists of 9 members. 3 born Ahmadis and 6 converts. And this, gentlemen, means that our Jamaat in Iceland is the only Nordic Jamaat where the converts are in majority. And now to Norway. In the autumn 1956, some 15 and 16 years old Norwegian boys came in contact with Kamal Yusuf Sahib, who at that time was living in Sweden. For the younger generation, this sounds incredible, but it was only a contact by writing. We didn't have phone, we didn't have cell phone, we didn't have internet. And the boys could not afford to go to Sweden. And as far as I know, nor did Kamal Yusuf Sahib have money to go to Norway. You cannot imagine how poor our Jamaat was. You cannot, this younger generation, you cannot imagine how poor the whole movement was at that time. Anyhow, and as already said, we didn't have telephone. None of our boys, the boys had telephone in their homes, and Kamal Yusuf Saab had no telephone. So we have to write letters, and we did. So it was a question answered per mail. But this question answered per mail was sufficient to convince these three boys about the truth of Ahmadiyya. And early in 1957, those three converted and established the Jamaat Islam's Ahmadiyya-bevegelse in Norge, Ahmadiyya movement in Norway, in February in 1957. After some time, two of the young converts left the Jamaat, but one remained. And that is the person who is standing here. At that time, we believed that we were the first Ahmadis, Norwegian Ahmadis. But as you already have heard from the previous speaker, a young Norwegian lady converted in England, in London, in 1920. And when I myself visited Rabwa in 1974, I saw a photo in a photo album, a photo of a young Norwegian lady with the text, Miss Ella Louise Rød, Rashida, our first convert from Norway. So it means that there have been two Norwegian converts in the 1920s, and they were both ladies. Unfortunately, I have never been able to trace those two Norwegian ladies. Now, from the 1920s and back to the 1950s. Late autumn 1958, Kamal Yusuf Saib, who was still the only missionary in Scandinavia, was transferred to Oslo. Why? And now you should listen, because this is also a history of quite another world than we live in now. In the news report in an Oslo daily called Morgenbladet, we can read, as the first city in Scandinavia, Oslo is going to get a mosque. Representatives from the Mohammedan mission in Scandinavia are in these days in Oslo to find a suitable plot of land for a missionary center for the work in the Scandinavian countries. Previously, Stockholm has functioned as a center, but currency-related circumstances make it advisable to move to Norway. I repeat, currency-related circumstances make it advisable to move to Norway. That may seem very strange, but you have to keep in mind that the Ahmadiyya movement at that time was extremely poor. And in 1958, it was considerably cheaper to live in Norway than in Sweden. And I have to add that 2 years later, Kamal Yusuf Saib was transferred from Oslo to Copenhagen in Denmark for exactly the same reasons. At that time, it was cheaper to live in Denmark than in Norway. Our movement had to save money. Sweden, then to the cheaper Oslo, and then to the even cheaper Copenhagen. A minute ago, I read for you, or to you, as the first city in Scandinavia, Oslo is going to get a mosque. And yes, it was the intention to build a mosque here. In 1959, a plot of land was bought for that purpose in Høybråten, near Oslo. I remember that I saw it together with Kamal Yusuf Saib and Abdul Latif, from Hamburg in Germany. But after a few years, it had to be sold because our movement needed money for the mosque it intended to build in Copenhagen. In 1980, the Jamaat bought an old villa at Frogner in Oslo. The local authorities gave us permission to use it as a mosque. And in August 1980, the third Khalifa, may Allah be pleased with him, inaugurated the mosque and gave it the name Noor Mosque. Because of immigration of Jamaat grew and the mosque became much too small. By the grace of Allah, we succeeded in buying a plot of land here at Furuset, and after many difficulties, we succeeded in building the mosque in which we are just now. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah support him with his mighty help, inaugurated the mosque in 2011 and gave it the name Baitun Nasr Mosque. For many years, it was governmental radio monopoly in Norway, but in 1985, our Jamaat got permission to start Radio Islam, which was later given the name Radio Islam Ahmadiyya, and that radio still exists. In 1996, a Norwegian translation of the Holy Quran was published, and a new revised version is now under preparation. The Norwegian Jamaat has approximately 1,500 members. Most of them are living in Oslo area and use Baitun Nasr as the mosque, but we still use one room in our building, Noor Mosque. We have a Jamaat in the city Kristiansand and also a missionary there. And in that city we have a purchased house which we use as community house. We also have a missionary and a small Jamaat in the city Trondheim, but no community house there so far. One more minute. Some kind of conclusion. Looking back at the more than 60 years that have passed since the first Nordic mission was established in Sweden in 1956, my conclusion is that so far we have succeeded in translating the Holy Quran, in publishing pamphlets, in arranging public meetings, in building mosques, in taking care of those who are born Ahmadis. But we have not, definitely not, succeeded much so far in getting new converts. You can see here today. And that should, in my opinion, be our priority number one in the years to come, inshallah.